The South Carolina house fire conceals evidence of a contract killing. When a second death is discovered, police connect the two incidents and suspect a group of businessmen who will kill to protect their interests and settle scores. Agents must use their own tricks and their own criminal contacts to uncover the truth and stop the cutthroat conspirators.
Murder for hire is a complex crime. Solving it means finding the killer and whoever paid for the hit. In South Carolina, a death first ruled accidental was no accident. But that was just the beginning. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. Agents discovered greed, betrayal, and shady dealings, and found that sometimes family ties can strangle.
Florence County, South Carolina, lies at the heart of the state. An area where farmland meets swampland. And the working poor live side by side with the wealthiest families. Most residents of the small town of Atlanta lead quiet, rural lives, 25 miles from the city of Florence. But in the late 80s, a hidden danger began to disrupt the quiet. On the morning of June 10th, 1987, the volunteers of the Atlanta Rural Fire Department responded to a farmhouse fire outside of town. By the time they reached the scene, the house was engulfed in flames. It was the home of William Graham, a wealthy tobacco farmer well known in the small community. The firefighters struggled to control the flames, knowing the elderly Graham lived alone and might be inside.
That's command. Go ahead, let us see.
After 90 minutes, they finally extinguished the blaze. Investigators searched the gutted house, and in the bedroom, found Graham's body lying in his charred bed. After the body was removed, arson investigators searched for the cause of the fire. Burn patterns showed it began there in the bedroom. Chemical tests on the furniture, floor, and walls indicated that no accelerant was used to fuel the blaze. Near the fire's point of origin were several electrical outlets. The investigators believed it had been an electrical fire caused by faulty wiring in the farmhouse. They ruled the blaze accidental. At autopsy, a pathologist noted massive burn injuries and evidence of smoke in the victim's lungs. Deciding there was no need for x-rays, he concluded Graham's death was a result of asphyxiation due to carbon monoxide poisoning. County Prosecutor Dudley Salibi read about the case in the local papers.
Even though the autopsy had not indicated foul play, and even though there was no manifest evidence of arson, there were rumors throughout the Atlanta community that Mr. Graham had died as a result of foul play.
Sheriff's investigators followed up on the rumors, interviewing Graham's neighbors and friends. Some mentioned Graham had lately become paranoid about a murder plot against him. But police found nothing solid to prompt a homicide investigation. After checking every lead, the sheriff's office closed the case. Then, 7 months later, in January 1988, a hunter in nearby Clarendon County spotted a mound of dirt in a field. Checking it out, he made a grim discovery: human remains. He called police. Investigators determined the body had been placed in a grave only 10 inches deep and likely unearthed by scavenging animals. There was no evidence nearby to indicate who the victim was or how he died. The pathologist used dental records to identify the victim as Darnell Rhodes, reported missing a month earlier. Rhodes had been shot once in the back, twice in the face, and 5 times behind the left ear. A brutal murder, especially in this quiet community. At the time, no one had any reason to connect it to the farmer's fiery death 7 months earlier. The county sheriff's department wanted to bring in more resources since the violence was so extreme. So they called the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, known as SLED. Lieutenant Gary Martin, one of the investigative experts at SLED headquarters in Columbia, knew to be ready for anything.
Always expect the unexpected. Things aren't always the way they appear, and there can always be additional circumstances involving a case.
SLED agents and sheriff's detectives began by visiting area hangouts the victim, Darnell Rhodes, was known to frequent. Many knew the man and said that around the time of his disappearance, Rhodes was usually seen with a friend named Charles McCrae. The rumors were that Rhodes and McCrae were professional henchmen committing crimes for wealthy businessmen in the area. Investigators wanted to know who these men were, but no one would offer any names.
Numerous people in the Atlanta community stated that they had seen Charles McCrae with Rhodes the day before he was reported missing.
Investigators learned that after Rhodes went missing, McCrae hinted that he had killed him. To get the truth behind the rumors, investigators needed to talk to Charles McCrae. At about the same time, someone filed burglary and assault charges against McCrae that were unrelated to the Rhodes case. Clarendon County detectives decided to arrest him on those charges, hoping they could get him to talk about Rhodes.
The right to talk to a lawyer and have him present with you while being questioned.
At SLED headquarters, investigators explained the witness statements they had regarding McCrae discussing the murder of Rhodes.
You want to relate that to us right now?
The suspect said he might be willing to cooperate if he could protect 2 family members who helped him after Rhodes was dead, according to SLED agent James Gamble.
He said his nephew helped him dispose of the body and that he used his sister's automobile and that he didn't want his family being involved or accused of any part of this murder because they were not guilty. We'll do whatever we can to keep them from being involved.
When they agreed not to prosecute the others, McCrae admitted to shooting Rhodes to keep him quiet. He explained Rhodes had been talking to people about the murder of tobacco farmer William Graham.
Initially, the response from law enforcement was, no, there's no indication that that was a homicide. But then he gave them information which indicated that it was a homicide and which reopened the entire investigation.
McCrae claimed he had been hired to kill Graham and burn his house down. He said he broke into Graham's home late on the night of June 9th, 1987. McCrae found Graham asleep in the bedroom. He used a small caliber handgun, point blank behind the ear. McCrae stole the pistol Graham kept for protection. To cover the crime, he stuffed newspapers under the bed and lit them. As he left, he turned the lights on to make the growing fire less noticeable from a distance. McCrae sold both the gun he stole and the murder weapon to a friend. The agents asked who put him up to the killing. At first, he was afraid to say.
Did these two guys tell you why they wanted you to kill William Graham?
But eventually, he cracked. McCrae said it was two men, Bill Prince and Larry Marshall, business partners of Graham. Prince and Marshall hired him through an intermediary.
Hey, what's up? Okay, I got this old guy, William Graham. It's got to look like an accident. Okay, fire, I'm thinking. Yeah, I can do that. All right.
They offered him $20,000 for the hit. The agents knew of Bill Prince and Larry Marshall, prominent local businessmen, both millionaires. They also knew that if they went up against the pair before a local jury, they would need more than McCrae's word to prove a murder conspiracy. And they worried Prince and Marshall might get to McCrae and make him change his story. On April 18th, 1988, 10 months after William Graham's death, agents secured a warrant to exhume the tobacco farmer's body. Law enforcement needed to look for evidence that somehow escaped them the first time, that Graham had been shot to death. X-rays taken during the second autopsy revealed two .32 caliber slugs in Graham's skull and a small entrance wound behind his left ear. A pathologist removed the projectiles so they could be compared to the murder weapon. Sled agents recovered the gun McCrae sold to his friend. Ballistics examiners noted similarities between the grooves etched into the slugs and those in the pistol's barrel. They determined that gun could have fired the bullets that killed Graham. More evidence implicating Charles McCrae. But investigators also needed evidence on the men who allegedly hired him. Graham's former business partners, Larry Marshall and Bill Prince. Prince's involvement with the victim went well beyond business. Graham had been his father figure.
Bill Prince had been raised by William Graham from the time he was a teenager. They became business partners, and as a result of being business partners, they took out a $500,000 insurance policy out on each other.
Prosecutor Salibi worked with the sled agents developing the insurance motive.
We found out that Mr. Prince had contacted the insurance company many times immediately after Mr. Graham's death, wanting to know how quickly he could collect the proceeds. In fact, he even volunteered to fly up to where the company was located and collect the check.
Investigators learned that Bill Prince made $500,000 off William Graham's death. Prince had also tried to control Graham's burial proceedings.
We talked with the funeral home that handled Mr. Graham's burial and found out that Mr. Prince had offered to pay for the burial if the body was going to be cremated, which of course would probably have destroyed the evidence of the projectiles that were still in his corpse.
Authorities made no effort to hide their investigation of Bill Prince and Larry Marshall, and discovered that the men had lost $400,000 to Graham in a recent lawsuit. And 2 weeks before he died, Graham had filed a second suit against them. A compelling financial motive, yet it was only circumstantial evidence against two millionaires not easily intimidated by the law.
No one was charged other than Mr. McRae initially, because the only indication we had that others were involved were from Mr. McRae. There were no corroborating witnesses, there was no physical evidence.
Then investigators' early fears were realized. The one witness they did have backed down.
Mr. McRae soon recanted his story and refused to cooperate, so there was nothing to support what he was saying about others being involved.
Perhaps someone had gotten to McRae and convinced him not to cooperate. In any case, investigators needed a new break in order to pursue Prince and Marshall. In December 1988, that break would emerge in a South Carolina cemetery. In 1988, South Carolina Law Enforcement Division agents investigated an arson and alleged murder for hire in the death of William Graham. When Charles McRae confessed to the killing, he said that millionaire businessmen Bill Prince and Larry Marshall hired him for the hit. But then McRae recanted and the investigation stalled. 8 months later, a lawyer asked SLED agents to meet him in a local cemetery.
With FBI. Yes.
He said he represented a man named Fred Peachy Andrews, who had information on the case.
Is that he knows who killed Mr. Graham.
What situation?
He's very nervous. The first thing he wants is protection.
SLED agent James Gamble.
The lawyer explained to us that Mr. Andrews was fearful of his life because he knew a good bit about the murder of Mr. William Graham.
The attorney said Andrews wanted to talk to authorities discreetly, so they set up a meeting. In a parking lot the next day, Fred Andrews spoke with SLED agents James Gamble and Gary Martin. He said he used to run an illegal gambling operation out of his office, and through that operation, Bill Prince and Larry Marshall came to him about a contract killing.
They had approached Peaches to either kill or find someone to kill William Graham because they thought Peaches had all these underworld contacts because he was running these poker houses and he'd going back and forth to Las Vegas, things of that nature.
And they got some other guy.
He said Prince offered $20,000 for the hit, but later told him that Charles McRae had been hired instead. When McRae started talking to the cops, Larry Marshall and Bill Prince began calling Andrews, threatening him to keep quiet. Prosecutor Dudley Salibi.
He was threatened not to reveal what he knew. That had the opposite result of sending him to law enforcement.
Andrews agreed to help get more evidence against Prince and Marshall and set up a tape recorder on his home phone. If the men called again, he would be ready. It wasn't long before Bill Prince did call.
You know who this is?
Once again, Prince brought up the Graham investigation. He said he heard Andrews was talking to SLED, and he and Larry Marshall needed to be sure he wasn't ratting on them. But this time, it was caught on tape.
That kind of talk can get a person killed.
Bill Prince stated to Fred Andrews that if it's true what I hear that you're saying to law enforcement, a lot of people could get hurt.
You're gonna pay the price.
To me, that implied that for his own safety, he should not cooperate with law enforcement.
It appeared Prince was willing to kill his father figure for money and any witness against him to keep them quiet. Sled agents and prosecutors put together their case against Prince and Marshall. They had the original statement of the alleged hitman Charles McCrae, physical proof that Graham had been shot to death, the statement of Fred Andrews that Prince and Marshall ordered the murder, and the tapes of calls threatening Andrews not to cooperate with police in the investigation.
We gathered all the information that we could. We went to the Florence County Grand Jury, presented the case, and they were indicted for the death of William Graham.
Investigators secured arrest warrants for the two businessmen. On April 6, 1989, deputies and agents arrested Bill Prince outside a real estate office. He was charged with solicitation of murder, conspiracy, and accessory before the fact of murder. When Larry Marshall heard of Prince's arrest, he tried to run.
Sir, can you step out of the car, please? What's this all about, officer?
But another arrest team found him driving out of town. They arrested him on the same charges in connection with Graham's murder. On May 6, 1991, at the Florence County Courthouse, the trial of Bill Prince, Charles McCrae, and Larry Marshall began.
What conversation did you have with Mr. Prince?
The state's key witness was Fred Andrews.
And, he said someone needed to be killed. And he said that man was William Graham.
He testified about Prince and Marshall approaching him about killing Graham and then threatening him after McCrae was arrested.
20,000. Yes. Thank you. No more questions for this witness, Your Honor.
You may step down.
The jury heard about the two businessmen warning Andrews not to talk to police about the murder.
No further witnesses at this time, Your Honor. So noted.
On May 14, 1991, the local jury convicted Bill Prince and Larry Marshall of accessory before the fact and solicitation of murder. They also found Prince guilty of murder conspiracy, but it wouldn't last. The jury convicted Charles McCrae of burglary and conspiracy. But then, surprisingly, they acquitted him on the murder and arson charges.
You may approach.
Attorneys for the millionaires jumped at the apparent legal contradiction. They argued that since McCrae was acquitted of Graham's murder, their clients should be granted new trials. The judge agreed, overturning the jury's verdict, and released Prince and Marshall on $100,000 bond. The Florence County Solicitor's Office appealed to the state Supreme Court, asking that the guilty verdict stand. After 2 frustrating years of delays, the South Carolina Supreme Court delivered its opinion in December 1993. The court granted Larry Marshall a new, separate trial, citing insufficient evidence against him alone, showing intent to have Graham killed. Prosecutors decided not to pursue a new trial. There was more evidence showing Bill Prince actively sought a hitman to kill Graham. To the Supreme Court, Prince did order the murder. Legally, it did not matter who carried it out.
Ultimately, South Carolina Supreme Court upheld Mr. Prince's convictions for conspiracy, for solicitation, and accessory before the fact of murder, which carries a life sentence.
Prince's bond was revoked on August 29, 1994.
Miss Prince.
A team of investigators went to his home to take him into custody. He was to be held to await sentencing. But his wife said he had been gone for days. Agents searched the house but found no sign of him or where he went. Prince's truck was also missing, and investigators learned he had liquidated $190,000 worth of property. He had a head start and plenty of money with which to run and plan his next hit. After being found guilty of murder for hire, South Carolina millionaire Bill Prince jumped bond before sentencing. Days later, a South Carolina state trooper responded to a call about an abandoned vehicle. When he ran the plates, he learned it belonged to the fugitive, Bill Prince. It was sitting by the woods near Lake Santee, South Carolina, on the way to Georgia. Two major interstates, 95 and 26, intersect in the area. An easy escape in any direction.
Same license plate?
Believing Prince had fled the state, authorities contacted the FBI field office in Columbia, South Carolina. Special Agent Joe Youngener was assigned the case.
The sheriff's office said that they had contacted his friends and his relatives, and they did not know where he was. Once we obtained federally an unlawful flight to avoid confinement warrant, then we started looking for Mr. Prince throughout the United States.
They needed to narrow the scope of the search.
I learned at that time that Bill Prince had a brother, Don Prince, who lived in Wilmington, North Carolina, and was an insurance businessman. And he had taken over some of the business affairs for Bill Prince.
They believed he might also be helping to hide his brother.
We decided not to interview Don Prince because we did not think we would get his cooperation.
Instead, Wilmington agents developed cooperating informants in his neighborhood.
Morning, sir. This is Agent Henderson.
When they knew Don was at work, they interviewed neighbors and explained they were conducting a federal investigation that required discretion.
Yeah, that's my neighbors.
Several recalled seeing Bill Prince with Don and agreed to help.
Well, let me leave the business card with you and ask that you give me a call.
And they knew Don Prince's comings and goings, where he went to work, where he lived, and proceeded to watch this and report to the FBI in Wilmington.
Within days, the plan worked. One neighbor spotted the Prince brothers outside Don's house. As promised, he contacted the FBI.
The Wilmington FBI office notified me that this lookout had actually seen Bill Prince there at the house, at the residence.
You asked me to... Yes. Yeah, they're down in Dijon.
By the time the FBI got the information, he was gone.
The many waterways of Wilmington would provide escape routes few would notice. Agents maintained surveillance on Don Prince, hoping he would lead them to his brother. But catching up with the millionaire fugitive wasn't easy.
Bill Prince was harder to catch than the usual fugitive because he had virtually unlimited resources. Bill Prince and Don Prince were both successful businessmen. They had money, they had cars, they had boats, and they had airplanes. They had offshore contacts, and they moved around. And once Bill Prince was able to solicit his brother's help in hiding him, this caused it to be a more difficult fugitive case. The FBI had received information that Bill Prince may be in Puerto Rico, may be in the Bahamas, he may be in Wilmington, North Carolina, he may be in Florida.
Agents responded to every reliable sighting in these areas accessible by boat and small plane. But each time, Bill Prince was gone when they arrived. Soon the FBI learned Bill's brother Don was doing more than hiding him.
We also received information that Don Prince had contacted witnesses who had testified against Bill Prince, trying to get these witnesses to recant their testimony so that Bill Prince could get a new trial.
I'm an associate of Mr. Prince.
An intermediary for the Princes tried to get witness Fred Peachy Andrews to sign an affidavit swearing to new testimony.
Testimony at Mr. Prince's trial might be in your best.
But Andrews had no interest in changing his story.
I don't want to sign anything that has anything to do with any of you guys. You got that?
It really might be in your best interest. You need to take a look at this.
Yeah, I hear you.
His testimony would stand. But Don Prince convinced 20 other witnesses against his brother to sign the affidavits. Andrews was the holdout. By December 1994, Bill Prince had been gone from Atlanta, South Carolina for 4 months. Several times, his people had reached out to Peachy Andrews to get him to recant. Finally, on one chilly December night, someone tried to eliminate him.
Peachy informed the Florence County Sheriff's Office that someone had shot at him at his residence. This was a consequence, we suppose, of him testifying against Bill Prince. However, no one was ever captured, no arrest was ever made.
After the attack on Andrews, Larry Marshall came to the FBI asking for protection, fearing Prince would have him killed. Agents needed to find the fugitive before anyone else in the community got hurt. The FBI developed an informant close to Prince who was afraid to be seen talking to cops. So they slipped him the phone number to a dedicated answering machine at the field office, asking him to leave any tips he had on the machine. In August 1995, the informant called in.
Hey, I got a number for him. It's a pager. 423-555-2769.
The pager's billing address was a motel room in Knoxville, Tennessee. The Knoxville FBI office sent a surveillance team to the motel. They set up outside the room and waited. After several hours, they spotted a man resembling Prince.
He had changed his appearance from the way that we knew Bill Prince. He was wearing a straw hat, he had a suntan, and he had on a casual shirt. And the agents realized that this was the fugitive, Bill Prince. He first said that he was not Bill Prince, but then once they started talking with him, he acknowledged the fact who he was, and they arrested him.
After a year on the run, Bill Prince was finally going to prison. But even prison would not stop his orders for violence. After 52-year-old millionaire fugitive Bill Prince was captured, he was sentenced to life for murder for hire at the Lee Correctional Institution in Bishopville, South Carolina. Bill Prince would not be eligible for parole until he was 72 years old. His brother Don often visited. At the time, the convict was allowed unmonitored visits. Authorities had no idea what the two discussed, what they were planning. They only knew that Bill Prince wanted out and that his attempts to get a new trial had failed. Prince wasn't willing to give up. 2 months into his sentence, he began talking with a fellow inmate about revenge and murder. The inmate said he could orchestrate murders for hire through his contacts on the outside. Prince wanted 5 men killed. Fred Andrews, the main witness against him. Larry Marshall, his former co-defendant. Agent James Gamble, who helped put him away. An elderly man on whom he held life insurance. And even his own son, whom he thought was conspiring with Marshall to take over his fortunes. But Prince made a critical mistake. That inmate was an informant for the FBI. He worked for Special Agent Rob Weisenhofer of the FBI's Columbia, South Carolina field office.
Having informants in the prison system is almost as important as having them out on the street. It's paramount to have as much information coming out of the prison system as we can get, so it's important to maintain good contact inside. And they talk to the other inmates in the institution. A lot of times we'll find out what happens from talking to an inmate source.
The source told Weisenhofer about Prince's request for 5 contract killings.
The story was something that was hard to believe because it was so incredible and something that you'd really see on television or read in the paper, but not really an everyday thing.
Weisenhofer spoke to Special Agent Joe Youngener in Florence to ask about Prince's history.
Joe right away said, that all fits with everything that's happened, and I would not doubt that this guy's trying it again.
The informant was scheduled for knee surgery, so the agent met him in the privacy of the infirmary. Weisenhofer was not surprised to hear Bill Prince had his brother's help in the murder-for-hire plots.
Bill Prince was willing to pay a hitman, and the payment would come through his brother, Don Prince.
The informant said the brothers wanted to start by killing Andrews.
We asked the prison informant to play along with Bill Prince because we needed to corroborate what he was telling us. We were concerned that Bill Prince was attempting to find a hitman. We didn't want him to do that before we could intercept him. And so we decided to play the role of the hitman.
The informant would orchestrate the hit on Andrews, then arrange a meeting between the fake hitman and Don Prince, where they could complete the payoff and plan the other murders.
Just on this.
Agents from SLED and the FBI prepared for the sting. Bill Prince was just as dangerous inside the prison walls as he had been outside, as long as Don Prince was out there willing to do anything to help his brother.
Bill Prince and his brother Don Prince.
Investigators needed to stop the two by securing clear evidence of a murder conspiracy. According to SLED agent Billy Chastain,
Bill and Don Prince were not only brothers, they were true partners in crime. We needed to build a case not only against Bill Prince, but against his brother, who was not incarcerated and had never been incarcerated for any serious crime before. And we felt like we had to tie the two in a conspiracy to make it work.
the informant met with Prince and told him he had found a man for the job.
He said that the hitman was a member of a motorcycle gang and that for $5,000 the hitman would kill Peachy Andrews, and Bill Prince took him up on the offer.
The informant said he only needed to know where Andrews lived.
Bill actually drew a map for the informant. We then had that map mailed to us by the informant. When we checked it, it was real.
The map led agents directly to Fred Andrews' house. More circumstantial evidence of the brothers' conspiracy.
Mr. Andrews, FBI.
The agents met with Andrews and told him about the hit ordered against him.
No, sir. We don't have time.
They offered Andrews protection
Send somebody back.
and requested his help with the sting operation.
We needed something that would spur a conversation between the informant and Bill Prince, and we decided that the way to do that would be to tell Bill that the hit had taken place.
Andrews agreed to help provide proof he had been killed. Agents staged a photograph of Andrews as the apparent victim of an execution. They would get the photo to Bill Prince with the story that the hitman took it after the murder. Then Andrews would go into hiding, further supporting the story of his death. At the prison infirmary, agents gave the photo to their informant. They also wired him for his meeting with Prince. They wanted to get Prince on tape, making arrangements to pay the hitman through his brother. So far, they had very little incriminating Don Prince.
We had to prove to Bill that the murder had indeed taken place so he can pass that along to his brother, who was really the hidden man in this whole deal, because he was slick and he always worked under the table.
The informant met with Bill in the prison yard, handing off the staged murder photo. But there was a problem. Prince said he did not believe it was Peachy Andrews in the photo, claiming his beard looked different.
Yeah, what that? That's what that looks like.
One more complication in a frustrating case. South Carolina investigators faked the contract killing of government witness Fred Peachy Andrews, trying to catch brothers Bill and Don Prince in the first of 5 murder-for-hire plots.
Wasn't enough.
A prison informant showed Bill Prince the picture of the hit, but reported to agents that Prince did not believe it was Andrews in the photo. Special Agent Rob Weisenhofer had to convince Prince and get it on tape.
Bill Prince had asked several questions. One, what type of ring was Peachy Andrews wearing, and what did the tags on his car say?
Let's do it again.
Agents gave the informant the details he needed and sent him back to meet with Prince. The informant told Prince he just spoke with the hitman by telephone. He gave him the information requested about the ring and the license plate.
Ring drives a blue Oldsmobile, license plate NEB 531.
Prince was still skeptical. He told the informant he needed more to be convinced.
Oh, another day in paradise. What's more proof?
Frustrated, Special Agent Joe Youngener decided to add one more ruse to the investigation and planted a rumor that might help.
Joe Youngener over in Florence mentioned to a newspaper reporter there that he should check the police impound lot in Florence County. When the reporter went by the impound lot, he noticed Peachy Andrews' car was there. Mr. Andrews is sort of a local character, and that car was well known around Florence. So when the reporter saw that car, he put 2 and 2 together and realized that that Peachy Andrews, who had been an important witness in the Bill Prince trial, was missing.
Conducting interviews, the reporter learned Fred Andrews had not been seen for over a week, and people were beginning to talk that something had happened to him. What he did not know was that Andrews was holed up in an FBI safe house. On December 14th, 1995, the reporter published a story about Andrews' disappearance. When Don Prince read the column, he brought it to his brother Bill.
They were huddled together in the meeting room, and it was apparent they didn't want anyone else to hear what was going on.
It looked like Bill Prince was finally convinced that Andrews had been murdered.
Thank you. See you later.
Now he would set up the payoff through the prison informant in a conversation taped by the FBI.
Don Prince left the institution and traveled on I-20 to a rest area about 65, 70 miles from Lee Correctional Institute, where he was told to look for a biker-type individual at the picnic area.
That biker type was, in fact, a SLED agent.
We had placed the undercover agent out at a table by himself so he'd be away from any traffic. We weren't sure how Don Prince was going to react when he was arrested, and we'd heard he always carried a gun.
Other agents watched from nearby to videotape the meeting and make the arrest. The rendezvous time was 5 p.m. The prearranged code was for Don Prince to ask directions to Turbeville, a town across the state. At 5:20, the subject pulled up.
Don Prince walked down and asked him where was Turbeville.
Must be done.
Special Agent Weisenhofer posed as a motorist using the telephone.
It's all there.
Agent Chastain and the others prepared to move on his signal.
Our code was when Special Agent Weisenhofer dropped the phone, then everybody would approach Mr. Prince.
The undercover agent said he was ready to do the next hit against Larry Marshall. But Prince said they wanted to wait until things cooled down.
We'll be in touch.
Special Agent Weisenhofer dropped the phone and confronted Prince. As I arrived, Don Prince put his hands up initially and put his left hand toward his pocket. And at that time, I brought him down to the ground, and then we effected the arrest.
Come on, buddy. Back here. Come on, man.
After we arrested Don Prince and put him in handcuffs, we picked him up off the ground, and as I was bringing him up off the ground, he said the things you do for your brother, and was coming to the realization what had happened to him at that point.
Agents recovered Don's gun from his car. His brother Bill was expecting to hear the payoff had taken place, but instead would soon learn Don had been arrested, and their days of ordering contract killings were over.
The Prince brothers are the most vicious individuals that I've ever been around. Bill and Don Prince are cold-hearted murderers in our eyes, and obviously in the court's eyes too.
Bill Prince, already serving a life sentence, was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and sentenced to an additional 22 years in federal prison. His brother Don was sentenced to 17.5 years for his role in the murder-for-hire plot.
It was a huge team effort between SLED and the FBI, and we were actually able to save some lives. But it's really gratifying when you realize at the end of the day that people probably would have been killed if we weren't there.
Bill Prince was moved to administrative segregation. No more unmonitored visits. No more murder plots. A man opens fire on rush hour traffic. A terrorist organization plots to overthrow the government. A member of law enforcement guns down an innocent woman. An armed bank robber strikes again and again. And a man abducts and kills a 17-year-old girl. As violent crime terrorizes the nation, the FBI must stop these criminals before they strike again.
In over 100 episodes of the FBI files, We've witnessed criminals not only terrorizing their victims with violence, but plaguing our society with fear. We look to both the experience and the courage of law enforcement to protect us and provide us with the hope that justice can and will prevail. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. In this special episode, we take a closer look at cases previously featured on this series. Our goal is to explore more fully some of the investigative methods and techniques that have made the Federal Bureau of Investigation the premier law enforcement agency in the world.
FBI Director Robert S. Mueller.
The FBI was originally established to address crime that covered cities, counties, and spread across state lines. The country needed a federal law enforcement entity to do those investigations. And over the years, as the country has grown and as the world, by the same token, has grown smaller, the FBI's mission has changed to meet the various threats.
October 1995. The Shaw family finds itself in the middle of a nightmare. 3 masked gunmen have broken into their South Carolina home. 2 hold several family members hostage, while the leader forces Amy Shaw to let him into the vault at the bank where she works as a teller. He gets away with $80,000, allowing Amy to remain unharmed. Before leaving, he calls his accomplices to tell them the job is done and that they should flee. Once their captors are gone, the Shaws call the police. Patrolling the neighborhood, police find 2 young men who they eventually take into custody. Since the gunmen were masked during the crime and left no fingerprints, police cannot tie these men to the scene. The 2 suspects give statements to the local police in which they deny taking part in the crime, but authorities doubt they are being truthful. FBI agents know they must try to get a confession. They will use interrogation techniques which require special training. Executive Assistant Director for Law Enforcement Services, Grant Ashley.
We graduate from a training school knowing a lot, but the real education starts when you get out and start working cases. That's when you learn about people, and you learn to ask questions a certain way, and whether the answer is truthful or not.
Special Agent Jerry Jones chooses a suspect and begins the interrogation. Like most agents, he starts by interviewing the suspect about matters that do not pertain to the case at hand. This helps him to choose an appropriate interrogation strategy.
It just becomes instinct. While talking to these people, you are able to develop a concept of what their greatest fear is, some weakness they may have in their past or their family or something of that sort. And in this particular case, it was fear of the death penalty.
Knowing that the suspect is unaware that the teller Amy Shaw is now safe, Agent Jones sees his opportunity and decides to exploit it.
And what I told him was that my main concern was the safety and well-being of the victim teller.
I want her back alive. If your friend killed her,
had a third robber killed her,
you're going to the electric chair.
They would both have faced the death penalty.
Jones knows that his choice to use this common technique must be measured. It could backfire. It may strengthen the suspect's resolve not to speak at all.
How about coming out and tell me the truth?
But the agent's plan works. Faced with the prospect of his worst fear coming true, the suspect admits his involvement in the crime and names the lead gunman, Christopher Jaburk. Police quickly arrest Jaburk at his mother's house just over the state line in Georgia. He is convicted on all charges. But Jaburk's crime spree has just begun. Before he can be sentenced, he escapes from jail with a bank robber named Jerome Frierson Bay. Authorities immediately lock down the area. Despite a massive manhunt, they find no sign of the 2 escapees. Agent Jones knows that when tracking a fugitive, Personal information provides important clues as to where the fugitive may go or what he may do next. During several interviews prior to trial, Jones senses a special bond in Jaburk's life, giving him an idea.
It became evident to me the only real thing in the world that he cared about was his mother. I was convinced that at some point in time he would come back to the mother. We established 24-hour surveillance.
But Jaburk doesn't show. Agents track numerous bank robberies committed by the two fugitives as they move up the East Coast. In New Jersey, authorities finally locate and apprehend Frierson Bay. Agents are disappointed Jaburk is no longer with them. But Agent Jones has a hunch.
I always believed that Jaburk would come back home.
The fugitive is located in Atlanta, staying under a false name. Jaburk is arrested without incident, returned to jail, and later sentenced to life in prison.
Over the years, you just develop an expertise where you can sense things about a person and his family relationships and things like that.
Agent Jones' individual instinct and experience were critical to bringing this case to a close. Sometimes it takes the efforts of an entire team to bring criminals to justice. Seattle, 1992. A gun-wielding man commits a string of daring bank robberies, threatening to kill anyone who gets in his way. Agents named the thief Hollywood for his use of theatrical makeup and disguises in his heists. Over the next 3 years, the gunman robs 12 banks, taking nearly $1 million and leaving behind few clues. To take down this elusive criminal, the Seattle police and the FBI must join several other law enforcement agencies in a unique investigative environment known as a task force. Executive Assistant Director Grant Ashley.
We bring together the resources of our state and local partners with the FBI and some of our federal partners so that we can get the unique skills and abilities of these agencies focused on a particular threat to get the maximum results.
But local law enforcement and federal agents do not always see eye to eye. FBI officials named Special Agent Ellen Glasser as the supervisor of the Puget Sound Task Force.
We had about a dozen different agencies, all of whom came with different missions, different intentions, and it was very interesting because we have different philosophies of how we do things, we have different policies, so it was very challenging to have everybody work together for the common good.
Seattle Police Detective Mike Megan is also a member of the task force.
I looked at it myself as being a guest in the FBI's house. You know, there was a lot of respect given to them, but there was hurdles to be broken down, you know, the preformed opinions or judging a book by its cover. We had to put things aside, such as egos and attitudes, and who is going to always take the lead, and who is going to be the point man, and you know, are the officers going to play second fiddle? And we had to come to an understanding.
The task force cannot expect to accomplish their mission if they cannot work as a team.
We had to work on communications between task force members every day. They were very strong-willed people that were on the task force. And my philosophy has always been that if you put relationships first and work on relationships with people, working together, then the mission will take care of itself.
With this philosophy, Glasser brings cohesion to the group. The task force is now working as one. Together, they determine the pattern and frequency of Hollywood's crimes, so they will be prepared to react quickly the next time he strikes. The effort pays off. On November 27, 1996, Hollywood is the prime suspect in an armed bank robbery. Through the combined efforts of the task force, police locate and corner him in a camper. Tragically, he ends his own life with a single shot to the head.
Even though people brought different experiences and different expertise to the task force, they were all able to blend and work extremely effectively together.
FBI field agents often receive the glory for solving cases. But the highly skilled technicians at the FBI crime lab in Quantico, Virginia, deserve much of the credit. They are more than scientists in lab coats. They are creative detectives whose tireless work will often decide whether or not a case is resolved. Dr. Dwight Adams is the assistant director in charge of the lab.
I knew I wanted to be a part of the FBI laboratory because it is a world-class facility. And you can look in the eyes of any individual in this building and you will see people who are very dedicated to performing at the very highest levels. And our only interest is in providing the truth, providing the most accurate, reliable, and unassailable results that we can.
January 11th, 1982. California Highway Patrol Officer George Gwaltney calls in a possible suicide off Interstate 15 near Barstow. When backup officers arrive, they find 23-year-old Robin Bishop dead from a single gunshot wound to the head. Police cannot find a gun at the scene, but they do find handcuff marks on the young woman's wrists. Clearly, this was no suicide. This was murder. In 1982, California Highway Patrol Officer George Gwaltney reports the discovery of a suicide victim on the side of the road. But since the victim was shot in the back of the head, investigators on the scene conclude that it was murder. The victim's driver's license and registration are visible, as if they had been taken out for some reason. To rule out the possibility that a police officer killed the young woman, the lead investigator orders all area officers to hand in their service weapons for ballistics comparisons. One officer fails to do so, George Gwaltney, who insists his gun has been stolen. Gwaltney becomes a suspect when investigators find the dismantled frame of his police-issued .357 in his truck. Someone has removed the barrel, the one piece that through ballistics testing can forensically tie the gun to the bullet that killed Robin Bishop. Police also find a box of ammunition in Gwaltney's bedroom closet. It is the same brand of bullet that killed Robin. In late 1982, the state of California charges George Gwaltney with murder, but a deadlocked jury results in a mistrial. A second trial in Superior Court also ends in deadlock. Investigators are convinced Gwaltney is guilty, but they can no longer charge him at the state level. They look to federal authorities for help. Special Agent Michael Randolph reviews the case and recognizes that Gwaltney is so cunning, prosecuting him will be difficult, if not impossible. Getting a conviction will take extraordinary tenacity from both the agents in the field and from the specialized examiners at the FBI's crime lab. Executive Assistant Director Grant Ashley.
Technology has been a great tool, but what still is the most important aspect for the FBI is the human side.
FBI examiner Jim Cadigan from the lab's Firearms and Tool Marks Unit tries to find a link between the evidence and the suspect. Normally, he would compare the striations in the murder weapon's barrel to those on the fatal bullet. But the barrel is missing. Cadigan will need to think outside the box to find another way to the truth. He knows that investigators had confiscated vice grips and wrenches when they found the revolver's frame.
The question was, could one of these tools have been used to hold the frame while the barrel of the firearm was being removed?
Cadigan decides to use a technique known as tool mark analysis. He notices a small impression on the gun frame, then checks each of Gwaltney's tools until he finds a pipe wrench with a broken tooth.
And that looked very similar to the mark that was on the frame. So using that as a pivot point, I started making impressions with that tool and comparing those impressions under a microscope. I was able to come to the conclusion that that particular tool was used to the exclusion of any other tool to make the marks that were found on the frame.
Although this points to Gwaltney as having removed the barrel of his gun, it is not enough to prove he killed Robin Bishop. Investigators will have a case if they can find a link between the fatal bullet and the box of ammunition from Gwaltney's closet. In an unprecedented move, the lab decides to employ a new technique they've been developing, which matches the molecular content of the bullets. FBI Special Agent Michael Randolph.
When a manufacturer of lead like Remington Arms makes a batch of lead, they throw things in much as you would when you're making meatloaf. That makes each batch of lead unique.
In the FBI's very first nuclear ballistics examination, scientists place a fragment of one of Gwaltney's bullets in a nuclear reactor, where it absorbs neutrons and becomes radioactive. When measured, the radioactivity reveals the precise amount of each element in the lead, an atomic fingerprint. Examiners then repeat the process with a piece of the fatal bullet.
And lo and behold, we find approximately 27 rounds that are the exact match as the lead taken from the head of our victim.
In January of 1984, George Gwaltney goes on trial, this time in federal court. Gwaltney is found guilty and sentenced to 90 years in prison. 12 years later, George Gwaltney died in prison of a heart attack. Executive Assistant Director for Law Enforcement Services, Grant Ashley.
There's the unsung heroes that you never hear of, the people sitting back in the laboratory that make sense of this. This takes an awful lot of time, and it takes extraordinarily talented, patient people.
Proving a case using hard scientific evidence is an essential tool of every law enforcement agency. But when authorities have no clear suspects and very little physical evidence, the FBI must rely on one of their most unique and least understood disciplines: profiling. May 31st, 1985. On a lonely road in Lexington, South Carolina, 17-year-old Sherry Faye Smith checks her mailbox before disappearing without a trace.
Sherry!
2 days of fruitless searching leads investigators to conclude that she has been abducted. Early the next morning, their fears are realized when the missing girl's family receives a call from the kidnapper. He explains they will eventually get their daughter back and tells them that they will receive a letter later that day. When the letter finally arrives, the family is horrified. Written in Sherry's handwriting, the document is entitled Last Will and Testament. In South Carolina, a young woman has been abducted. Her life is on the line, and investigators have no idea who the suspect is. In an effort to identify what sort of man would have kidnapped Sherry Faye, investigators call upon FBI profilers at the Investigative Support Unit in Quantico, Virginia. Profilers are veteran agents who receive specialized training in criminology and applied psychology. Retired FBI Special Agent John Douglas advanced the art of behavioral profiling for the FBI. For over a decade, he and others conducted interviews with convicted killers, arsonists, rapists, and kidnappers in various prisons around the country.
I tapped through that memory of theirs that no one has ever tapped into before when they were perpetrating the crime. It takes time, but once I'm in there, I get tremendous information.
Douglas and others cataloged and categorized their findings, creating a statistical database from which profilers can draw inferences about criminals based on patterns of behavior.
I'm very much like a doctor in medicine, where I'm trying to come up with a diagnosis, and I'm going to rely on the thousands of cases that I've worked. I'm going to rely on the hundreds and hundreds of interviews of offenders who committed similar types of crimes.
When creating a profile, Douglas needs to review all investigative materials, including preliminary police reports and crime scene photographs.
You really need to have all the information relative to the victim. You have to do an analysis, a profile of the victim. You ask yourself the question, why was this victim the victim of this crime? And then you look at the way the crime was perpetrated, the low-risk crime or high-risk crime. When someone asks for a profile, what they're looking for are physical and behavioral characteristics, which includes age, race, sometimes body typing, educational level, occupational type. Sometimes it may include right down to the type of vehicle the person will be driving, may include the overall behavior of the subject, whether or not he's very, very rigid, obsessive compulsive on one extreme, to being very, very sloppy and careless on the other. And so it can include sometimes as many as 100 characteristics in the overall profile.
At the request of South Carolina authorities, Douglas turns his attention to the Sherry Faye Smith case and reviews all the case materials.
What made the case unique was that we have a subject who's communicating with the family, which is very, very rare, very, very unusual. I felt good about it because when you have a communique, whether it's a written communique or a verbal communique, you can do an analysis of that, and it begins to paint a pretty nice picture of the type of person we should be looking for. It was as if he followed a script that was written out beforehand. Here is someone who will be very, very rigid, very, very orderly, very, very tight.
After scrutinizing every detail of the abduction, Douglas generates a 22-point profile. The subject is likely a male with a prior criminal record and lives locally.
The nature of the criminal beast is that they will perpetrate crimes and they will, as well as dispose of crimes in areas where there's some type of familiarity.
Douglas also believes the abductor has feelings of inadequacy and compensates for that through violent actions.
He feels like nothing. He feels like a nobody. And how can this nobody, this personality, this person who's probably overweight, low self-esteem, unattractive, how can he become a somebody? He'll go after victims that there was no chance that he would ever come in contact with someone like a Sherry Faye Smith. And so for the first time in their life, they can be powerful.
2 days after the kidnapper's last communication, he calls the family with specific directions to where they can find their daughter.
Listen carefully. Take Highway 378 west to traffic circle. Turn left at white frame building. Go to backyard. 6 feet beyond, we're waiting. God chose us.
Investigators race to the location, hoping to find the young girl alive. When they arrive, their worst fears are confirmed. Sherry Faye Smith is dead. The body, having been exposed to the extreme heat and elements for several days, is so decomposed it makes determining the exact cause and time of death impossible. To the profiler, the detailed directions to Sherry's body, as well as the condition of the crime scene, provides further insight into the suspect's mind.
It told me that he had been out to that crime scene on several different occasions because he was very specific as to the number of miles and tenths of miles and number of feet where she can be found. It also told me that he had some criminal sophistication because I believe what he did is he waited for her to go into advanced stages of decomposition, which would make it more difficult for law enforcement to determine cause and method of death.
On the evening of Sherry's funeral, the killer calls again and asks to speak to her sister, Dawn.
Hello? This thing got out of hand, and all I wanted to do was make love to Dawn. I've been watching her for a couple of weeks.
To who?
In a chilling moment, the killer uses Dawn's name in place of Sherry's. Investigators brace themselves for the possibility that this killer may be turning his murderous obsession towards Dawn. South Carolina investigators are searching for the man who murdered 17-year-old Sherry Faye Smith. FBI profiler John Douglas assists the investigation by providing a profile of the suspect. After 2 weeks spent underground, the killer resurfaces. In a bold move, he snatches 9-year-old Deborah May Helmick from her front yard in plain view of another child. For profiler John Douglas, the killer's shift to a riskier crime is a sign that he is under duress.
The crime does not reflect distress at that time. However, what happens when you start putting it together from experience of other cases, i.e. the Ted Bundy case, kills women at the Chi Omega house, and then he goes after a young child. He's totally starting to break down under the stress of being under the scrutiny of law enforcement trying to hunt him down.
After kidnapping Sherry Faye Smith, the killer had repeatedly called the family. But this time, he remained silent. Douglas must devise a plan to draw him out. He knows that killers will often follow their crimes in the media. So he decides to organize a memorial service that he knows will be reported in the newspapers. He hopes this will rekindle the killer's fascination with Sherry Faye's sister, Dawn. The kidnapper takes the bait and makes a call to Dawn.
You can't be protected all the time. Okay, God wants you to join Sherry Faye. It's just a matter of time.
Then, before hanging up, the killer gives Dawn a series of directions.
Okay, listen carefully. Go 1 north, turn right. Deborah May is waiting. God forgive us all.
Investigators follow the directions. There, they find the body of 9-year-old Deborah May Helmick. Douglas suspects the killer will likely try to abduct Dawn. Meanwhile, forensic scientists use a process known as electrostatic detection to read invisible indentations on Sherry Faye's last will and testament. The information leads investigators to a suspect, Larry Gene Bell, a local blue-collar worker. Police interview people who know Bell. In learning about him, investigators find that he matches Douglas's profile exactly. Authorities arrest Bell. Forensic evidence and Douglas's profile help convict Bell of both murders. He is executed on October 4th, 1996. In this case, Douglas was instrumental in identifying an unknown killer. Profilers can also confirm suspicions about known suspects. In 1983, Alaska state troopers are investigating the state's first serial killer. Dozens of women, mostly exotic dancers and prostitutes, have disappeared. Many are never seen again, but some turn up in shallow graves with .223 caliber shell casings nearby. The state troopers have a suspect, a local family man, Robert Hansen. A year earlier, a prostitute had told the local Anchorage police that she had been abducted and tortured by Hansen before she was able to escape. Anchorage police officers interviewed Hansen's friends, confirming his alibi. They searched his house and car, but found no evidence and suspended the investigation. Investigators felt that Hansen, who owns a local bakery, was too unlikely a suspect. But when the state troopers learn of the prostitute's report, they believe he may be the serial killer they are searching for. Investigators contact FBI Special Agent John Douglas for help.
And this wasn't really to do a profile. Here they have a suspect, so what you do is you do a personality assessment of this individual and some of the circumstances around him to see whether or not this person has the capability, the capacity, the propensity for violence.
The fact that the killer had murdered so many meant to Douglas that he has the means to function unnoticed in the community, someone who works independently. Since the bodies were recovered in remote areas of wilderness, the killer could possibly be an avid outdoorsman. Hansen fits the profile. He is both a small business owner and a recreational hunter. Since he preyed on prostitutes and exotic dancers, Douglas concludes the killer would have low self-esteem and had probably grown up feeling like an outcast.
Hansen was unattractive. His face was all pockmarked, had a speech impediment, which probably caused him a lot of problems as a kid growing up.
After reviewing all the case materials, Douglas concludes that Hansen was indeed capable of murder. If investigators are to prove Hansen's guilt, they'll need physical evidence. To obtain a search warrant for Hansen's home, they'll have to convince a judge of what they will find there.
You want us to ask a question first?
The profiler's role now switches from confirming suspicions about a suspect to helping investigators develop a search warrant. Authorities know they need to look for the gun that left the .223 caliber shell casings found near the bodies. They ask Douglas if there is anything else to list in the warrant.
We're dealing here with a serial killer. It starts off as fantasy. And one of the things to keep the fantasy going after the crime is they take some type of a memento. We call them either souvenirs or trophies. Something belonging to the victims. It doesn't have to be anything expensive. It could be a cheap watch or costume jewelry. And what they'll do is that they'll keep this. They're not going to keep this out in open view. They're going to secrete this in places within the house, under a crawl space if they have it, or up in the attic under insulation.
Douglas helps prosecutors write the affidavit, which swells to 48 pages. A judge approves the warrant. During the search of Hansen's house, investigators find the trophies Douglas suggested would be there, including the business cards of some of the victims. They also find several weapons. Among them is a .223 Ruger rifle. Ballistics testing proves it is the gun that fired the shells found near several of the crime scenes. Confronted with all the evidence, Hansen finally breaks. He confesses to murdering 4 women and is sentenced to 461 years with no chance of parole. While a profiler provides a psychological picture of a criminal, agents in the field use their instincts, experience, and deductive reasoning to get inside the mind of a suspect to uncover motive. On the morning of January 25, 1993, a lone gunman opens fire in front of CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, killing 2 CIA employees and injuring several others. In 1993, a gunman unleashes his fury with an AK-47 outside CIA headquarters, killing 2 and wounding others in a hail of gunfire. FBI Special Agent Brad Garrett arrives on the scene and attempts to piece together a motive for the attack.
The first thing you do when you walk into a crime scene is, what's the obvious? Well, the obvious is this appears to be directed towards the CIA. It might be directed towards the individuals that were shot. But it was clearly somebody wanted to make a public statement during a rush hour traffic. So that sort of gives you a shell at least to start from. In any case you investigate, you always look for a link between the victim and the subject, because if you have a link, it tends to make it a lot easier in solving the case versus strangers who commit crimes against other individuals. But once we started looking at the backgrounds of the individuals that were shot, and we looked at the circumstances as to why they were at that intersection, it didn't appear, at least to me, that there probably was a link between those particular individuals being shot and the person that shot them. So we immediately started looking at who within the CIA, in other words, disgruntled employees, present employees, that may have had a relationship with these people that could have retaliated for whatever reason. But after spending some time doing that, there was really nothing in there that jumped at us either. So where do we go from here? Well, you start looking at the logical things. You have a description of an individual who did this shooting. Brought an assault rifle up to shoulder and started shooting down range. And so you're looking for somebody that appears to have a real issue with the CIA.
By cross-referencing the killer's physical description with a database of recent purchases of AK-47s, investigators identify a suspect. He is 28-year-old Mir Amal Kanzi, a Pakistani immigrant. Garrett's initial assessment of motive is confirmed during interviews with people who know Kanzi, including his roommate. They reveal that he was becoming enraged by U.S. foreign policy and was planning something sinister against the CIA, White House, or the Israeli embassy. Unfortunately, Kanzi has fled to either Pakistan or Afghanistan. To bring the fugitive back to the United States for trial, Garrett must utilize what is arguably an agent's most important skill: his ability to anticipate obstacles and to devise ways around them. After 4.5 years of pursuit, Agent Garrett receives information that Kanzi is hiding in a Pakistani hotel. But when they apprehend him, there is a problem.
One of the fears I had when we went in the room and looked at him is that he didn't look like his picture. He gained weight, he had a beard, and so I looked at the other 3 agents and I said, you know, I'm not sure if this is the right guy.
Agent Garrett must be absolutely positive. Without properly identifying the suspect, he cannot bring him back to the United States.
I did not want to leave that room without being convinced in my own mind that the individual that was handcuffed on the bed was, in fact, Mir Amal Kanzi.
The only way for Agent Garrett to make a positive ID is through fingerprint analysis, typically the job of highly skilled lab specialists who are thousands of miles away in Washington. Fortunately, Agent Garrett had thought ahead.
I went to FBI headquarters to the latent fingerprint section and worked with one of the experienced latent fingerprint examiners who actually took the 10 fingerprints of Mr. Kanzi. Then we actually studied them over several days and learned all the unique characteristics so that I would be able to identify him by fingerprints once we found him.
Beautiful world.
Now Garrett must put that training to use.
He was handcuffed, face down on the bed. And I took a fingerprint ink pad and hit his thumb with the ink. Then I took a white piece of paper and then hit his thumb onto the white piece of paper, so then I hit his thumbprint. I got on the floor of the hotel with a flashlight, a magnifying glass, and his prints.
It's a match. Thanks to Agent Garrett's foresight, he can now bring a suspected terrorist back to the United States for prosecution. Mir Amal Kanzi is found guilty of murder, malicious shooting, and using a firearm in the commission of a felony. He is sentenced to death and is executed in 2002. Special Agent Brad Garrett's unique training and experience helped him close this case. But sometimes an agent's greatest asset is his ability to adapt to new situations and think on his feet. Executive Assistant Director Grant Ashley.
These are people that want to win. They aren't here just to get a paycheck.
1985. In the hills of Arkansas, an army of extremists plot to overthrow the U.S. government. They spread a doctrine of hate, murder, and genocide, launching death raids on churches and synagogues. Federal agents must dismantle this heavily armed militia without igniting a bloody war. The FBI follows a trail to the compound of the Covenant, the Sword, and the Arm of the Lord, or CSA, a violent group of white supremacists. The compound is heavily fortified, and the men inside are armed with grenades, dozens of automatic weapons, and even a powerful anti-tank rocket. Investigators need to serve arrest and search warrants. But unlike most circumstances where a SWAT team would be utilized, this situation is more delicate. Reports confirm that innocent women and children are inside the compound. With hundreds of lives in the balance, there can be no margin for error. Authorities working the case do not have the expertise or manpower to take on the CSA. And the U.S. Constitution bars the military from aiding in a civil investigation. The FBI decides to send a highly trained tactical group called the Hostage Rescue Team, or HRT, the Bureau's equivalent of the Army's Delta Force. The HRT acts as a counterterrorism unit within the borders of the United States. In 1985, Special Agent Danny Colson is the commander of the HRT.
The HRT basically are assaulters. It's their job to go into a crisis point and neutralize terrorists and rescue hostages. But this was not that type of situation. These people are very well armed. They were very formidable. And we wanted to avoid a shootout.
To serve the arrest and search warrants safely, Colson needs to adapt to the circumstances. With their traditional method of attack out of the question, they devise a different approach.
The very reputation of the FBI was dependent upon this case, and we believe that without any doubt the best way to do this was to surreptitiously set a perimeter, which would be very dangerous and difficult, but certainly less dangerous and difficult than doing an assault on that compound.
During the first phase of the operation, reconnaissance teams penetrate the compound's perimeter in the dead of night. Using handheld and airplane-based sensors, they avoid roaming CSA patrols. After 10 days of scouting, an HRT sniper team reports a CSA patrol is about to unwittingly stumble across their position. As team leader, Colson must make a split-second decision that could affect the lives of hundreds of people. In 1985, the FBI is closing in on the CSA, a right-wing paramilitary organization based in Arkansas. Over 200 agents secretly surround their compound. FBI snipers report a CSA patrol is about to discover them. FBI hostage rescue team leader Danny Colson must act quickly. He knows if he makes the wrong move, a bloody war could ensue. His decision is surprisingly bold.
I said, you hail them, you yell at them and tell them you're the FBI and tell them to go back inside. And everybody kind of looked at me like, whoa, why don't we grab these two guys? And I didn't want to do that.
Colson's tactic is calculated for maximum effectiveness.
I wanted to scare the daylights out of these guys. But I also wanted them to understand that if I gave them an order, they had to follow it. I wanted them to get in the habit of following my orders or the orders of my team. And secondly, to show them that we weren't there to hurt them.
The sniper alerts the roaming patrol and orders them back inside. They comply, but now the CSA knows the FBI is outside their compound. The standoff begins. Now someone must negotiate the surrender of the CSA's leader.
Well, the HRT doesn't have a negotiating element, but they work very closely with the behavioral science group at Quantico.
The FBI tries to determine the most effective way to deal with the CSA leader, who they suspect will be unwilling to speak with a negotiator.
He would only talk to the HRT commander. It would be commander to commander or general to general. The FBI's policy on negotiations has always been that leaders never negotiate. The leader of the HRT, a on-scene commander, never, ever, ever negotiates. To have the leader negotiates takes away some of your techniques. You can't stall for time. You can't play good guy and bad guy between the negotiator and the commander.
Nevertheless, the FBI decides they want Colson to take on the role of negotiator, since that is their only option.
I wasn't comfortable with that. I'm a tactical person. I had been a sniper and I'd been a SWAT team member and a SWAT team leader and trained as an operator. And I was not trained to be a negotiator. And I didn't know that I could pull that off. I'd much more comfortable going in after the guy than trying to talk him out. But they were adamant that it had to be done like that.
Through his experience in observing negotiations and some quick on-site training, Colson is able to adapt to his new position. The CSA leader makes first contact when he calls the FBI's command post and speaks with Agent Colson.
We talked on the phone for a few minutes about things we wanted to do. He offered to me that he'd be allowed to come out because he wanted to personally talk to me and see me, but he also be allowed to go back in, which I agreed to, which was total departure from FBI policy. And we made a quick contact with FBI headquarters because I was getting ready to violate FBI policy by having a badly wanted fugitive, a terrorist, in my hands, essentially, and then let him leave. And went up then with the assistant director of the criminal division. In a word, he approved it, said, yes, do it.
After a series of face-to-face meetings, the CSA leader emerges from the compound. He tells Colson that while he and many of his followers are ready to surrender, there are those who wish to fight, and he cannot control them.
And he said to me, I need help. He said, there's a man that's our spiritual leader, and I need his advice, and I need his help to convince people that's the thing to do, come out. And I said, who is this? He said, it's Robert Millar. This, again, is something totally against FBI policy, to bring in a Confederate into a crisis situation, not just to negotiate, but to go inside. That's never been done in the history of the FBI. They'd never allowed that to happen, to allow a third-party individual who was sympathetic to the people we were dealing with to go inside to be a part of the negotiation whether or not they came out. This is a huge risk, and I thought it was worth taking.
Colson gets approval to allow Mr. Millar to negotiate with CSA members.
Nice to see you again.
He remains inside the compound for nearly 24 hours. The next morning, day 4 of the siege, Millar and the CSA leadership finally emerge.
They came out and they said, we have an agreement that we will surrender. We will come out and we'll give up our arms and walk out peacefully.
As commander of HRT, Colson receives the news with guarded optimism.
You're constantly thinking about the worst case scenario. Even good things have to be looked at with some suspicion. Was it a diversion to get out the backside and start a firefight? So we had to be very careful.
Colson gives the leader 15 minutes to gather his people and bring them out.
And very shortly after, I get a communication from a sniper team that they're coming. They're coming out. The snipers report that they're in civilian attire. There's no camis, there's no battle gear, there's no weapons they can see.
Miraculously, the HRT accomplishes its mission without a single shot fired.
It was an ending that we had all prayed for, and one that we were very fortunate that we had.
If not for Agent Colson's quick thinking and ability to adapt in tense situations, the standoff would likely have had a much bloodier conclusion.
It shows what the FBI can do in a major crisis situation. It shows the number of different disciplines it has at its disposal, how they can bring unlimited resources on the focus of a problem. It's a great big machine. It grinds you up if you're a bad guy, and it's what happened here. This wasn't an HRT story. It's an FBI story.
We have seen just a few of the many ways in which the FBI works to solve cases. With each new investigative challenge they face, we can rest assured that the Bureau will dedicate itself to doing whatever it takes to protect the American public.
They work with perfect precision, stalking their prey, waiting for the right moment to strike. The payoffs are huge, millions of dollars for a few minutes of violent work. They leave no evidence behind, but to get away, they're willing to leave bodies. The FBI and local police must stalk this dangerous gang of thieves and break up their bad company.
In Boston, FBI agents and local police tracked a gang of robbers who specialized in armored car takedowns. Their MO was familiar. The gang used precise timing to steal millions in cash and burn their getaway cars to destroy evidence. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. As the robberies grew more violent, agents launched a complex sting to trap a deadly ring of thieves and shut down their dangerous operation.
December 22nd, 1987. Outside Boston, Massachusetts, just before 8 a.m. a time when most professionals are heading to work. But today, a group of professional criminals are also on their way to a job. Their target is Weymouth, 18 miles south of Boston. They arrive at a bank at 8:30 a.m. and sit tight.
Here they come.
They aren't waiting for the bank to open.
All right, guys, lock and load.
The heist is on.
See those hands? Hands up! Hands up! Clock, let's go! Let's go! Give me a key. Let's work on one. Go, guys, run the clock. Go! 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 Let's go! Let's go! Hurry up! Let's go! Gotta get out of here. Put your hands up! Look down. Don't you look at me. Don't you look at him.
They stop a few hundred yards away behind a nearby shopping center.
Hands up! Get out! Get out! Get out! Don't move! Let's go, guys! Come on, let's go! Get some water. The clock! Come on, guys! Let's go! Come on, you guys! Hurry up! Hurry up! Come on, let's go! We're on the clock! Let's go! Come on, we're almost there! Let's go! Let's go!
The men get away with over $1 million. It's one of the largest armored car heists in Massachusetts history. Weymouth police get the call about the robbery and notify the FBI. Police officers and agents respond within minutes. FBI Special Agent Jim Crawford is among the first to arrive at the scene.
I was in that immediate area for unrelated reasons, conducting an investigation. I heard on my radio that there had been a robbery of an armored truck in Weymouth. Upon arriving at the scene, which was just probably a few minutes after the robbery, I proceeded into the parking lot area. I observed several money bags that were left outside on the ground that the robbers did not take with them. That was the most surprising fact that I observed immediately.
While investigators are working the scene, they receive a report of a burning blue van fitting the description of the getaway vehicle. The van is less than a quarter mile from the bank.
There was a vehicle there that had been burning for probably at least 10 minutes, and pretty much it was burned out completely. There was no determination of any vehicle identification number. There was nothing of any evidentiary value found in that vehicle.
At the bank, forensic investigators comb through the front parking lot where the robbery began. They search for anything the robbers might have left behind, but find nothing. Police also process the armored car for clues. Again, they find nothing. The armored car crew tells agents they didn't get a good look at the robbers' faces because they wore masks.
All of them had masks, but I think they were white because I could see one of the eye holes.
The robbers also wore gloves. Forensic techs don't lift a single usable print. What troubles agents most about the heist are the robbers' tactics.
It was very unusual. Gunmen unloaded the vehicle, and they had a countdown. One person was serving as the count. He used a stopwatch. They knew exactly how much time they were going to spend perpetrating the robbery. The professionalism that they handled the truck, the getaway area where they had burned out the vehicle, very professionally accomplished.
The job is so professional, agents have almost nothing to go on. The only clue investigators have is puzzling.
I believe they left on the ground over $1 million.
These robbers, whoever they are pros. Leaving that much money to stick to a timetable suggests they've done this before.
This was the most disciplined, the most training, the most cautious group that I've been involved in with 30 years in the FBI.
The agents know this is going to be a tough case to crack. This gang is good, and they probably are not working alone.
Usually on this type of professional robbery, it's always looked at the possibility of an inside person. There was nothing to indicate here that was the case. I know the guards had been interviewed during the course of the investigation, but nothing to indicate that they were involved in this robbery.
The precision of the Weymouth heist reminds Agent Crawford of the string of jobs pulled over 25 years ago by a legendary Boston criminal named Richie Harold.
During later part of 1977, I was the case agent on a robbery of the Wells Fargo armored truck that occurred in Braintree, Massachusetts. As a result of that investigation, I developed sources that indicated the primary suspect in that robbery was an individual by the name of Richie Harold.
In the 1960s and 1970s, Richie Harold and his gang were suspected in multiple armored car robberies which were considered to be perfect crimes. Although no fingerprints are found in Weymouth, Agent Crawford feels Richie Harold had something to do with this.
The similarity between the Weymouth armored truck robbery and the Wells Fargo and Braintree were that they were restricted on time on the Wells Fargo robbery, just as the Weymouth one. They were highly professional in their commending of the vehicle, the armored truck. They left no witnesses behind, nothing of evidentiary value.
But Richie Harold couldn't have pulled off the Weymouth job. He's dead. The Boston area has always been a haven for armored car robbers. Agents know what to do. They hit the streets and start working the usual suspects.
In the 60s and the 70s, Charlestown was kind of infamous to have a lot of young men that were involved in bank robberies and armored truck robberies. Hijackings of trucks, for example, were very prevalent in the 70s there, and then more professionals got involved with the perpetration of armored truck robberies during the 70s, the 80s.
To broaden their reach, the FBI forms a task force with the Massachusetts State Police and Boston Police Department. They cast a wide net, questioning every informant they have.
You're really depending on confidential sources to lead you at least the right direction, people that are involved in this type of activity.
But the informants don't give the investigators anything. The investigation stalls, and agents know with a gang this good, it is only a matter of time until they strike again. On December 22nd, 1987, robbers hold up an armored car at a Weymouth, Massachusetts bank and get away with over $1 million. Special Agent Jim Crawford.
They were not foolish at all to go buying large purchases or talking to anyone, and they pretty much operated in secret and were well disciplined to stay away from anybody that might inform on them.
Despite the task force's best efforts, the trail of the Weymouth robbers goes cold. The task force disbands after a year of hard work. Even so, investigators fear they haven't seen the last of the robbers.
I believe that these individuals would strike again. Number one, they were successful. The amounts of money they obtained was very significant. There was no indication to them that they were being closely monitored by the police or the FBI. And it was a matter of time that they were involved in another robbery.
Agents worry they will lose more than money if the robbers strike again.
The individuals that take the task on robbing an armored truck, first of all, go with the idea that they're going to escape and perpetrate this robbery no matter what they have to do. That would include killing police officers.
May 31st, 1989, a year and a half after the Weymouth robbery. At a bank in Fitchburg, Massachusetts, about 60 miles east of Boston. Agents' concerns about violence tragically come true. The robbers take control of the armored car in seconds. Once again, the robbers force the driver to take the armored car around to the back of a shopping center near the bank. It is the exact same MO as the last robbery, only this time they leave very little money behind. Robbing an armored car is more lucrative than a bank heist, according to FBI Special Agent Jim Crawford.
The average bank robbery today, between cameras and bulletproof glass and bait money, it's risky for not a whole lot of money, not substantial sums. If someone wants to spend the time and training on perpetrating an armored truck, the rewards are far greater.
They use a smoke grenade to obscure their escape. As the wounded armored car guard fights for his life, police try to find the men responsible.
Deborah, you saw 3 men come out of here? Yeah, I saw 3 of them.
Officers like Massachusetts State Police Staff Sergeant Richard Rand try to get descriptions of the robbers.
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Some saw the robbery in progress, but as far as identifying the individuals or giving significant information about their identity, they were masked, and there was very little information that was provided that could lead to identifying the suspects.
Police see the robbers torched a getaway vehicle. They know the suspects had to find another way to flee. The most likely escape route, into the woods. But there's a deep stream that would be difficult to cross. Further into the woods, investigators find a makeshift bridge over the water.
They'd gone to the time of preparing their exit so that they could get across the stream and probably not get all that wet, so that they would obviously stand out to other people or law enforcement if they were approached in the short time after the robbery.
Officers follow the path and come out in a residential neighborhood. Across the street, a potential witness. Police learn the man saw something suspicious just a few minutes earlier.
Hello, sir.
He watched 3 men walk out of the woods carrying large sacks. Then a car drove up. He didn't get a good look at the men carrying the bags, but he saw the driver. Police issue an APB for the car with 4 men inside and radio the driver's description. Police dispatch helicopters to search for the vehicle. "40 minutes after the robbery, investigators find the robber's car a few miles from the bank. The robbers torched it to destroy the evidence. But unlike the Weymouth robbery, this time some items inside didn't burn, including a blanket, a bank bag which held money, and an unexploded dye marker designed to go off when thieves opened the money bags. Because the dye marker didn't explode, the robbers must be experienced enough to open the money bags without setting them off. This time, the fire didn't destroy the vehicle identification number.
Well, the VIN plates typically survive these fires, and they're visible through the windshield. And first thing that was done by arriving law enforcement was to run the VIN numbers.
Police learned the car was stolen months earlier in Weymouth, Massachusetts. The FBI finally has evidence that could put them on the robbers' trail. May 31st, 1989. The FBI and local police investigate a violent armored car robbery. The robbers get away with over $800,000. The robbers shot an armored car guard in the back. They left him to die in the bank's parking lot. Paramedics rushed the guard to the hospital. Miraculously, he survived. A few miles away from the bank, investigators found a burned getaway car. They recovered the VIN number and determined it had been reported stolen in Weymouth, Massachusetts, months earlier. Police found another torch vehicle in the rear of the bank. They believe the robbers also burned it as a diversion. The police and the FBI get a break. They find a flare inside that was designed to start the fire. It didn't burn completely. This car was also reported stolen, but its ignition was intact. At this scene, the evidence helps the FBI. But the wounded guard signals that these robbers are becoming more dangerous. Even with the evidence left behind, Massachusetts State Police Staff Sergeant Richard Rand fears these robbers will be tough to catch.
They had a good plan in place to execute the robbery. They had a good plan in place to make their escape. And they had a good plan in place to destroy whatever evidence could possibly be left at the scene for law enforcement to gather against them. So they had done their homework, and they knew the armored car schedule, they knew the bank schedule, they knew everything that they needed to know about how to execute their plan, and it was a very well executed plan.
Agents interview witnesses and learn the robbers used duct tape to seal the gap between their sleeves and gloves, as well as their pants and boots.
These robbers were very sophisticated in that they made sure that they didn't shed any evidence at these scenes.
Investigators find no useful evidence inside the armored car, no bullet casings at the scene. The Fitchburg job is so similar to the robbery in Weymouth 18 months earlier that it catches the attention of FBI Special Agent Jim Crawford.
The similarities between the Fitchburg and the Weymouth robbery were that, number one, they were both professionally done. Both robberies were timed. They knew exactly how much time they were going to spend in the area of the victim truck. They used an incendiary device, both on the getaway vehicles. These people knew exactly what they wanted to do, and they knew how to do it.
But the FBI and local police still know very little about this gang, other than the fact that they are experienced and dangerous. It will take every weapon in the FBI's arsenal to bring them down. Investigators follow up on their best clue left by the Fitchburg robbers, the burned car. They learn the car had been reported stolen from South Boston 6 months earlier. But the vehicle's ignition showed no signs of tampering. Police suspect the robbers may have had a key.
I interviewed the owner. He had stated that he had in fact reported the car stolen, but that he had lent the car to a friend, and that friend had come back to him and said that the car was stolen. He'd parked it somewhere and it had been stolen.
The friend who borrowed the car is named Greg Hicks.
FBI. Speak to him a second, please.
Investigators have reason to suspect Hicks himself in the theft.
We came up with the fact that he had a criminal record for a number of petty crimes and auto theft. And it seemed like he had a substance abuse problem.
Greg, I'm gonna show you a picture.
Investigators pressure Hicks to come clean about what happened to the car.
It wasn't particularly difficult. After some conversation about the severity of the crime, that he'd been using an armored car robbery, somebody been shot, these are serious crimes, and that because he was the last person to have the car, and he could be implicated. He had admitted that the car was not in fact stolen, that he'd borrowed the car, and that he'd given the car to a person, and that he'd gone back to the owner of the car and told him that the car was stolen so that the owner would report it stolen.
Greg Hicks also admits to stealing the sedan used in the Fitchburg robbery. He says he gave both vehicles to a man named Carl Tucker the night before the gang struck the armored car in Fitchburg. Investigators hit the streets again, asking their sources about Carl Tucker. Nobody knows anything. They turned to veteran Boston police detective Martin Coleman.
He was a sleeper. We knew nothing about him. He was doing aluminum siding and replacement windows out of a storefront on Broadway in South Boston. He owned the building, but his hobby was robbing armored cars and getting information about armored cars.
Investigators do not have enough evidence to confront Tucker. There are no eyewitnesses to the crime, and he has made no incriminating statements. All they have is Greg Hicks' claim that he gave stolen vehicles to Tucker. Agents tail him, trying to learn more.
We had confidential sources indicate that the persons responsible for these robberies were hanging out at a lounge in South Boston.
Investigators try to learn the identities of Tucker's associates. At the same bar, they see a known bank robber named Fred Rogan. Rogan has a connection to a robber Crawford knows all too well.
He was an individual that came to my attention back in the 70s. He was suspect in the robbery in Braintree, associated with Richie Harold. I had done surveillances in the 70s and seen Richie Harold meet with him. On one occasion, I believed I observed them surveilling a bank in the area of Quincy, Massachusetts.
If Fred Rogan was involved in the 2 armored car robberies, it would explain how the robbers could pull off such an elaborate job. Almost 2 years after the Weymouth heist and 2 months after the Fitchburg robbery, agents finally have suspects. The question is whether agents can bring down this dangerous gang before it is too late. 2 armored car heists 16 months apart net a gang of robbers over $1.8 million.
Got it? Get in there, go.
On the first job, on December 22nd, 1987, The gang left no evidence behind and took over $1 million. It is one of the largest heists in New England history. The second heist didn't net as large a take, but the robbers made an uncharacteristic mistake. They failed to completely torch a getaway car. A VIN number on the vehicle led them to a man named Carl Tucker.
Damn stuff.
Tucker hangs out at bars frequented by Fred Rogan, the protege of a dangerous but now dead armored car robber named Richie Harold. While agents know quite a bit about Fred Rogan, they know very little about Carl Tucker. Investigators hit Boston's streets to ask contacts in the city's criminal underworld for background on Tucker and any associates he might have. Boston Police Department Detective Martin Coleman is part of the FBI task force investigating the robberies.
We had a pretty good idea who was capable of doing these armored car robberies. And it was, as the saying goes, round up the usual suspects, and that's exactly who we started to look at.
One of the usual suspects is convicted thief Steve Farrell, who just got out of prison weeks earlier. He couldn't have been part of these robberies, but he might know the men who were.
He had committed armored car robberies himself. As an employee of one of the armored car companies, he drove off with the truck one day.
It isn't long before Farrell gives investigators a big break.
I said, do you have any ideas of who the armored car crew is out doing these armored cars?
Farrell automatically states that Carl Tucker is probably involved.
And I was shocked that I hadn't even mentioned the fact to him that he had ordered the stolen cars. I set up a meeting with him and Special Agent Crawford in a Chinese restaurant in the middle of Chinatown.
We operated, I should say, with the source on a very confidential basis. There were only two people that knew that basically he existed during the course of this investigation. That was myself for months and months and Detective Coleman, because we were concerned not only for his safety, but any possible, because these people had contacts with different police authorities.
Steve Farrell explains he knows Carl Tucker fairly well as an acquaintance in Boston's criminal underworld, but they have never worked together on a job. He says Tucker is known on the streets as the King, and that he uses a legitimate business to launder dirty money from robberies. Farrell's help is a huge break for the investigation. His information is solid, and he wants to help shut this gang down. He volunteers to work as an FBI informant to gather more information on Carl Tucker.
I don't know how much longer I've got.
Farrell explains he's in failing health because of a heart condition and wants to make up for his criminal past before it's too late.
The source wanted to show his children that he had moral fiber. He wasn't just a criminal. And to prove it, this was his way of proving that he could do something. He wanted to prove that he wasn't the person that his kids thought he was.
Investigators are concerned for Farrell's safety and caution him that he'll have to enter a witness relocation program once the investigation is complete. Farrell is still willing to put his life on the line. It isn't long before Farrell establishes contact with Carl Tucker.
Hey, man, what you doing?
All right.
All right.
Doing all right.
Hey, buddy,
They were both aware of each other's backgrounds. They both, streetwise, trusted each other.
Might have some work.
But trust in Boston's criminal underworld only goes so far. Tucker is slow to talk.
Hey,
He always played it cool, never told him he was in the armored car business, never mentioned any other members of the gang. And this went on for quite a while.
Farrell hints that he needs work, hoping Carl Tucker will bring him into the gang. But Tucker is too cautious to take the bait.
We were getting nowhere. And finally we said to the source, why don't you tell him that you have a relative that's in the armored car driving as a driver?
Tucker is intrigued. He asks Farrell if he could use his contacts at the armored car company to obtain what is known as a trip ticket.
That'll help us out a lot.
A trip ticket would provide valuable secret information to a professional armored car robber.
You're not giving them the key to the armored car, but you're giving them the location where the armored car would be, at what hour, and what kind of money it would have.
The trip ticket was so valuable to the robbers, again, because any professional that believes he has inside information, it's like having inside information on a race or a lottery.
Farrell offers to do his best to get the trip tickets. The FBI agents on the case win approval from the U.S. Attorney's Office to furnish Farrell with trip tickets to give to Carl Tucker.
It was kind of one of those things you had to really think long and hard and willing to be very dedicated. Once you gave this, it was your responsibility to make sure that that armored car started its route and finished its route without being robbed at some other location.
The tickets are for an armored car's Tuesday routes. The handoff goes down. The FBI has set the trap. Now all they can do is watch and see if Tucker takes the bait.
Everything good? That's great, thank you.
You know how tough it was to get.
In order to solve a series of violent armored car robberies, the FBI hands a known criminal specific information for an armored car's Tuesday route. It is a big risk, but one they have to take if their informant Steve Farrell is ever to win the trust of the FBI's prime suspect, Carl Tucker. The plan works. With the gift of the trip tickets, Farrell gains Tucker's confidence.
Everything good? Everything's great, thank you.
FBI technicians install a listening device in Steve Farrell's car to capture the increasingly open conversations Carl Tucker is having with the undercover source.
I'd have to say on this source that he was a natural. Always got direction from the FBI, things that you would want to say, basically not to entrap, that type of instruction, the legal instruction, but he knew the street as well as any seasoned FBI agent.
We only take a certain amount of money in a certain amount of time.
Carl Tucker begins to open up about his criminal enterprise with Farrell.
Splitting it up even? Pretty much.
But he is always vague about the exact details of future jobs. Surveillance efforts slowly reveal the identities of Tucker's associates, men the FBI know all about. Men like James Murphy.
Jimmy Murphy always claimed he wrote the book on armored cars. He always liked to brag that he was the best armored car robber in the country.
Another associate is Michael Habich.
Well, Michael Habich was a career criminal. He'd been in prison most of his life. He always carrying a gun, a violent criminal, also an armored car robber.
Investigators know Fred Rogan is an old pro.
He had a history of bank robbery and armored car robberies. He was one of the usual suspects and lived within 200 or 300 yards of the Weymouth armored car robbery.
We don't get greedy. Right.
Farrell takes it all in,
Do our homework.
and so does the FBI.
Yeah, things are good. Low key. Low key.
Agents obtained the trip tickets from an armored car company that agreed to assist in the investigation. An armored car crew volunteers to help the task force. Agents warn the guards that a gang of armored car robbers will have trip tickets for their Tuesday routes. The agents assure the guards that they will not be alone.
Bad guys have trip tickets.
We'd placed an FBI agent in the armored truck, the potential victim truck, who was there basically to safeguard the guards, to be there in case something went wrong, to be there in the event that something happened earlier than we anticipated.
A team of investigators and agents will also tail the armored car. Over the next few months, agents observe the suspects shadowing the armored car.
They looked at the truck every Tuesday, and they timed it, what time it arrived and what time it left. And they knew exactly, same guards all the time. It was very interesting to watch them and not get caught ourselves.
Agents can never be sure whether any given Tuesday will be a dry run or the day the robbers strike. It adds up to a lot of long hours.
Every Tuesday for months, we started at 4 in the morning and didn't get through until the armored car left. And then we followed the armored car for the rest of its route to make sure that they weren't still following and going to take them down in another location.
June 1990, in Methuen, Massachusetts. FBI agents and an assault team watch what starts out as another dry run. Then, the suspects start to make their move.
Go, go, go!
June 1990, in Methuen, Massachusetts. An FBI task force watches a gang of dangerous armored car robbers. The gang spends months shadowing an armored car. An FBI task force believes the men got away with 2 robberies, one in 1987 and one in 1989, that netted them almost $2 million. Agents can never be sure if the suspects are rehearsing an upcoming robbery or if it's the real thing. At the bank in Methuen, the gang makes its move.
One of the vehicles they were driving made an overt move towards the armored truck.
Go, go, go!
Based on that, one of the surveillance vehicles followed just for safety purposes.
But the FBI task force and Special Agent Jim Crawford discover it's just another dress rehearsal. Being safe comes with a price.
Stand down, stand down.
Their prime suspect, Carl Tucker, could discover he's being watched.
Do a lot of homework, too.
The FBI has an informant, an ex-con named Steve Farrell, who has earned Carl Tucker's confidence. Through listening devices installed in Farrell's car, agents learn that Tucker was spooked by the Methuen experience.
He indicated that he believed that this could possibly be a setup. And our source was reprimanded, did you tell anybody about the activities of this location? Based on that discussion, our source backed off and said, who's to say somebody else didn't mention something?
Farrell tells Tucker that they can't work together if they don't trust each other.
Yeah, you're right. Procedures they have to follow. Right?
Tucker calms down and later tells Farrell that he and his crew will shift the robbery target to a bank in Abington, Massachusetts. trip tickets the robbers are working with give precise times when the armored car arrives and leaves Abington, and the amount of cash on board.
When they targeted the Abington, it was believed they approximately had $2 million in that truck on a given run.
Over the next several months, the FBI task force watches Tucker and his men stalk the armored car as it delivers money to Abington. The long hours every Tuesday takes a toll on investigators and resources.
There was lots of pressure to get this done because every Tuesday, half the office in Boston was out on this case. The surveillance team, the SWAT team, the airplane, everyone was working.
Agents are concerned about the expense and fatigue caused by shadowing the robbers. So they instruct their source to tell Carl Tucker that the Abington Bank is closing its branch, and that on January 9th, the armored car will remove a vast amount of cash.
We held that carrot out. It was a solid gold carrot. The bank was closing. It's time to do it.
Go ahead. It was something here. Which one? It's going to go down tomorrow. And that's the day they're going to do a dry
Agents learn that Carl Tucker is planning a dry run on January 9th, 1991. This could be the dry run that turns into a robbery. Agents surveil members of Tucker's gang in the early hours of January 9th. They notice pre-dawn activity that suggests the gang is up to more than a dry run.
They were seen carrying what were believed to be bags containing weapons, the way they were being handled. We strongly believed then that they were going to possibly make a move and attempt to perpetrate this robbery.
The suspects arrive hours before the armored car is scheduled to show up. They stake out the location. They don't know they are not alone. The FBI task force is there. Agents quickly identify multiple vehicles containing suspects, including a van. The FBI assault team is prepared for a robbery attempt when the armored car arrives.
Get out, we're going to take them down quick.
There was high risk involved basically on apprehending these people. We believed they would be armed based on prior history.
But by 10:30 a.m., the armored car still has not shown up. It's running behind schedule, unusual in the armored car business. Both the robbers and law enforcement are on edge. Then, the robbers discover the surveillance effort and attempt to flee. Agents decide to take them down. The task force converges on all the suspects' cars at once. The agents know they are inside, but they don't know if the men are armed. They proceed with caution.
Let me see your hands. Let me see your hands. Get your hands up. Get your hands up. Come on out. Come on out. Turn around. Turn around. Turn around.
Carl Tucker is taken into custody, along with two men from Ireland named Michael McNaught and Stephen Fitzpatrick. The old pro Fred Rogan had been standing guard outside a van. He tries to walk away by acting like a bank customer. But the ruse doesn't work. Inside the robbers' vehicles, investigators find several items that prove Abington was definitely not a dry run. Ski masks, police scanners, smoke grenades. The van had enough items to start a small war. The armored car finally arrives nearly a half hour behind schedule. Agents asked the driver why the armored car was so late.
We got stopped for speeding by the state police, he said. And then, what did you say to the trooper? We told him we were on our way to get robbed. FBI was waiting for us. The trooper didn't believe them and gave them the ticket.
In the end, all of the participants in the attempted armored car robbery in Abington were convicted. Michael Habich was sentenced to 19 years. The oldest of the group, Fred Rogan, got 10.5 years, as did the Irishmen Michael McNaught and Stephen Fitzpatrick. Carl Tucker received 19 years. James Murphy was the only suspect tied to the Fitchburg robbery. A witness saw him behind the wheel of the getaway car. Murphy fought his charges and received a 65-year sentence.
They were all criminals to the core. They lived a life of crime, and they were all repeat offenders, and they never got out of the business. And I assume that they're out of it now because there have been no more armored car robberies.
The FBI's chief source, Steve Farrell, provided damning testimony that helped convict the robbers.
I was with the prosecutors during the trial. The source's life was threatened by one of the suspects, then threatened his life in my presence.
Because of the threats against him, Steve Farrell went into the witness protection program. He died a few years later, knowing he had at least in part made up for his criminal past.
I would say with the source involved in this case, redeem himself, I would agree. He risked his life.
FBI investigators were never able to charge anyone with the Weymouth robbery. But if the Abington robbers perpetrated the job, it was a crime that came with a steep price. Each of them will spend at least a decade in prison.